If these unused moments had been preserved in their respective Star Wars movies, then much-loved Jedi Masters may not have survived Order 66. Fans could have found it tough to forgive certain villains turned heroes, and the boldest ending in the franchise's history would have possibly been lost forever. So I am Gareth, this is What Culture's Star Wars, and here are 10 more unused Star Wars scenes that would have changed everything. Number 10, Bail Organa's first appearance, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. One of the most underrated performances found in the prequel trilogy came from the terrific Jimmy Smits, with the veteran actor bringing the brave and warm adoptive father of Leia Organa to life superbly during episodes 2 to 3. Smits would also build on that excellent work as Bail Organa in the likes of Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, and the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV series. However, had George Lucas opted to stick to his original plan for one little deleted moment in episode 1, The Phantom Menace, maybe fans would be living in a world where Smits was never past the Organa Ball. Actor Adrian Dunbar was initially cast in the role of Bail Organa for that first prequel, with the character stating that Alderaan seconded the motion put forward by Padme Amidala for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum in an unused moment. Not only did that scene not make the cut though, Dunbar's role was also altered to that of Bail Antilles of Alderaan, one of the other figures nominated to succeed Valorum as Supreme Chancellor. Dunbar would later note how Lucas had told him his character would be involved in the next 2 flicks, but that ultimately never happened, and instead this original Organa was eventually replaced by the Smits. Number 9, Kylo Ren tortures Chewy, Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. By the time Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker had reached its divisive conclusion, most happily accepted the return of Ben Solo, and forgave the troubled soul as he finally helped Rey take down the Emperor and the First Order. But if one specific scene involving a then Kylo Ren and Chewbacca had been used in J.J. Abrams' underwhelming Skywalker saga finale, then perhaps fans wouldn't have been as quick to celebrate Solo's redemption. Now sure, Ren had already murdered his own father, but he was very much a man torn between the light and dark side as he suddenly impaled Han Solo on Starkiller Base, so he still wasn't seen as a complete monster at this stage. However, a deleted Episode 9 scene would have seen Ren heading to a place so dark when face to face with Han's best mate Chewie, the actor in the suit Yona Schwartamo noted in his Raw My Life as a Wookiee book that he felt people may have struggled to forgive Kylo Ren in the aftermath. Schwartamo remembered being genuinely scared of the intense Adam Driver throughout the filming of the scene involving Ren torturing Chewie, feeling the whole thing was likely just a bit too dark for the story Abrams and co. wanted to tell. In the end, the disturbing sequence that saw Driver becoming a real monster was scrapped, with Chewie just being saved after being captured by the First Order instead. Now I want to know really quickly, what is your favourite sequel moment? Was it Chewbacca being saved or something else? You let me know in the comment section down below. Number 8, Palpatine plants more seeds of doubt in Anakin's mind, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith certainly still boasted its fair share of moments between Anakin Skywalker and Sheev Palpatine, with the latter slowly manipulating the conflicted Jedi into joining him and turning to the dark side. But there was actually a deleted scene between the two that added even more glorious detail to Skywalker's heartbreaking eventual exchanges with his former master Obi-Wan Kenobi and beloved Padme Amidala on Mustafar towards the end of the flick. In this scene, the eventual Emperor was confronted by the delegation of 2,000, a number of senators who demanded Palpatine return his emergency powers to the Senate once the war was over. Here, after being presented with the petition of the 2,000, Palpatine proceeded to state to Anakin in private that the senators, including Padme, were not to be trusted. In fact, he'd even go as far as to tell Skywalker that Amidala was hiding something, before claiming that Anakin just did not want to admit he sensed betrayal in his beloved. With the inclusion of this scene, Anakin's decision to suddenly lash out at his wife once Obi-Wan is revealed to have joined her on the lava planet is actually shown to have been subtly orchestrated by Palpatine too. So not only was Palpatine responsible for making Anakin lose trust in the entire Jedi Order, this scene would have also shown how he planted the idea of Amidala's potential betrayal in Skywalker's impressionable mind, a move that directly led to Skywalker's choking off her and clashing with Old Master Obi-Wan. Number 7, Maz gives Leia Luke's lightsaber, Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Remember back when The Force Awakens' first few trailers melted the internet all those years ago? Well, during that marketing material, there was actually a moment there which showed the old pirate queen Maz Kanata handing the Skywalker lightsaber over to what looked like Leia Organa. But when fans finally sat down to take in the first chapter of the sequel saga, they were surprised to learn that Leia didn't actually end up holding the legendary weapon at any point. Instead, Maz ultimately attempted to give Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber to Rey after her Force-back moment. Before Abrams opted to have Finn take the weapon to the Resistance base and Starkiller base, however, the director originally shot a few scenes that would have involved Kanata following our heroes to that former location. Here, she would have obviously given the iconic lightsaber to Luke's sister. But after realizing that the character wouldn't have had much else to do once she delivered the blade, Abrams told Entertainment Weekly that he felt the moment just became unnecessary. It was soon taken out, and both the lightsaber and Maz's original journeys in the film were ever so slightly altered as a result. Number 6, Luke returns with a blue lightsaber, Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Speaking of lightsabers once wielded by the legendary Luke Skywalker, Return of the Jedi saw the iconic son of Anakin debut a marvelous green version of the sacred Jedi weapon. But if George Lucas had stuck with the initial and eventually unused version of the Jabba's sail barge sequence, then Star Wars fans may have had to wait a staggering 22 years to see the first ever green lightsaber. Qui Gon Jinn would go on to use a similar weapon in 1999's The Phantom Menace, of course. You see, when Lucas and the team began shooting the final original trilogy film, they initially had Luke using yet another blue lightsaber in the flick. However, they soon realized during production that this blue blade was rather difficult to see when ignited in front of the clear Tatooine sky. So the call was eventually made to switch the blade from blue to green in the end, but not before a teaser trailer for the flick in 1982 revealed footage of a blue-bladed Luke swinging his weapon around on Jabba's barge. With this trailer now reminding fans just how close they were to waiting 2 decades for the first cool green Jedi laser sword. Number 5, Clones in Disguise at the Temple, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. With Order 66 already well and truly being executed by the time Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda arrived at the Jedi Temple to disable the coded retreat message in Revenge of the Sith, the finished flick simply showed the 2 Jedi Masters cutting through a bunch of 501st Legion clone troopers that they once fought alongside. But had the original version of that slaughter been left in the flick, that temple return and brief showdown would have certainly hit differently. In an earlier iteration of the sequence, Kenobi and Yoda were first greeted by a number of figures wearing Jedi robes. From a distance, the Masters may have assumed they were simply about to exchange words with some remaining survivors of the Purge. But as they got closer, it became clear that they were actually dealing with a bunch of clones attempting to lure them into a deadly trap. Even after Kenobi tries to make light of the unsettling situation by quipping how their former allies made terrible Jedi, these one-time generals having to slice through clones wearing the robes of fallen Jedi would have made for a far more disturbing arrival at the temple than the one we got. It also would have highlighted just how far these brainwashed clones were willing to go to wipe out the Order. Number 4, Captain Phasma is turned on before her death, Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Most would agree that the badass-looking Captain Phasma ended up being unforgivably wasted during the sequel trilogy. By the time she disappointingly fell to her death in The Last Jedi, the character's only real highlight came in the form of her intimidating arrival on Jakku. If Rian Johnson had opted to keep Phasma's alternative death sequence in this middle sequel chapter though, the First Order villain would have actually been given a far more memorable end. In that other version of her demise, Phasma had Finn surrounded by his former colleagues. But just as it looked like the deserter was doomed, Finn reveals to all that Phasma was the one responsible for lowering Starkiller Base's shield after having a gun pointed at her head. Rather than just blindly continuing to follow Phasma after that revelation, however, her troops begin to question the person in charge. Then, before they can act, the Chrome Dome commits the most ruthless act of her entire time on screen, swiftly and brutally gunning down her own soldiers to conceal the truth. It's a properly shocking sequence, and unlike her other death scene, one that highlights just how far Phasma was willing to go to survive. Though she still couldn't do that in the end, with Finn ultimately blasting her through the chest in this deleted scene. Number 3, Force Ghost Qui Gon speaking to Yoda in the films, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. those who have experienced the gift that is the Clone Wars animated series will know that Master Yoda ultimately learns how to return from the grave as a Force spirit after communicating with the spirit of Qui Gon Jinn and passing a number of important tests. But there was once a scene that would have occurred towards the end of Revenge of the Sith that could have resulted in that aforementioned Clone Wars arc, one that went down before the events of Episode 3, likely never needing to become an animated thing. As Yoda meditated on a secret asteroid after battling with Darth Sidious, Qui-Gon's voice would have been heard telling the Jedi Master of the training he was set to give him that would help him merge with the Force at will. From here, Yoda would have likely begun learning the secret of immortality at the same time as Obi-Wan Kenobi, rather than having a head start, with the little green legend obviously then telling Qui-Gon's old apprentice about Jinn's training in the finished film. Now sure, it certainly would have been awesome to hear Liam Neeson's unmistakable voice one more time in the prequels, but when given the option of having this impactful Qui-Gon Yoda moment play out over one small scene, or over the course of a wonderful 3-episode animated arc instead, it's safe to say very few would opt for the former. Number 2, the heroes survive. Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Rather than have the heroic rebels fighting to bring down the Empire survive after successfully stealing the Death Star plans from the enemy, Gareth Edwards had the likes of Jyn Erso and Cassian Andor tragically killed by that very superweapon in Rogue One, a Star Wars story. It wasn't always gonna be this way though. One of the first drafts of the movie contained eventually unused scenes that would have seen Jyn and Cassian actually find a way to get off Scarif and hop in an escape pod after getting the plans over to Leia Organa. That wasn't necessarily because the likes of Gary Whitta and John Knoll wanted a happy ending, they just assumed Disney wouldn't sign off on a finale that sees all of our heroes biting the dust. However, after ultimately feeling that their instinct of all the heroes having to pay the ultimate sacrifice was the right call, they asked Lucasfilm and Disney if they could have their darker ending. The folks in charge told them to go for it in the end, with that happy ending, one that still would have seen droid K2SO die in action, being dropped in favor of the heartbreaking end they'd always desired. Huzzah? Number 1, Quinnland Voss died in the original Order 66 sequence, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. The charismatic and unpredictable Jedi Master known as Quinnland Voss was one of the few to have made it out of the galaxy-changing Order 66 alive. As recently as during Disney Plus's Obi-Wan Kenobi series, the titular Jedi was informed of the fact his old pal helped the Path smuggle younglings across the galaxy and safely away from the Empire. But had one deleted moment during Revenge of the Sith remained in the finished cut, then Voss surely wouldn't have been helping anyone. In the wake of Order 66 being given, Voss was once one of the first few Jedi taken out by the clone troopers. Whilst riding in a group of Juggernaut tanks on Kashyyyk, one of said tanks would have suddenly turned around and opened fire on the helpless general, seemingly killing him right there and then. The unfinished death scene / animatic obviously never made it into Episode 3 though, and Voss managed to thankfully survive in both Legends and canon continuity largely due to the character's popularity. Will fans ever see him again in the post-Clone Wars galaxy far, far away? Thanks to this scene never making the cut, at least there's still hope.